So I went ahead and I did my presentation on Dawson's Field. I know we kind of went over it in class a little bit, but I thought it was interesting and I just want to do a little bit more research on it. So in short, basically it was politically motivated. It was carried out by the Marxist-Leninist Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, or PFLP for short. And it was basically the whole Palestine versus Israel type of thing. What happened is 4 planes were hijacked, or eventually 5 planes hijacked, 4 in the beginning and then another one later. 3 of them were taken to Dawson's Field, and then this resulted in the Federal Air Marshal Service in the United States. So quickly here you can see Greece kind of off to the top left. Israel and Palestine are about right where that dot is. That dot is in Jordan though, and that's where Dawson's Field is. And Africa's down to the left there, just to get your bearings. So on September 6th, TWA flight 741 was out of Frankfurt. It was a Boeing 707, and then the Swissair DC-8, just standard run-of-the-mill hijacking, took over the plane, took it to Dawson's Field, unloaded all the passengers, and that was that. And then one of them failed. It was 2 PFLP members. It was originally supposed to be 4, but only 2 made it on the plane. The other 2 were flagged as suspicious and were not allowed to fly. One of them was named Khaled, the other one was Arguello. Arguello and Khaled posed as a married couple, and they took over El Al Flight 219. The captain was alerted and put into a negative G dive. Arguello was shot by security, and Khaled was arrested when they landed in Britain. And one of the security guards, I believe, was either shot in the arm or injured just in the scuffle in the scuffle that happened. It was a Boeing 707 as well. Anyways, the Israeli airline had security guards on the plane. A bit of a foreshadowing as to what Nixon would plan on doing a little bit later. So the next one is Pan Am Flight 93. This was taken off out of Amsterdam. The pilots were a little suspicious. They had the flight director give the 2 would-be eventual hijackers, a pat down, but they didn't catch the guns and the grenades that were hidden in styrofoam in their crotch. So shortly after takeoff, the plane was hijacked. It was taken to Beirut, where it was loaded with a lot of explosives and a bunch of associates of the hijackers. But since this was the 747, it was a brand new plane. I don't know when it was introduced, but it hadn't been in service for very long, and they didn't know if it was going to be able to land at Dawson's Field since it was so large. So the pilots ended up taking it to, or the hijackers, I guess, had the plane taken to Cairo so that they could blow it up in Egypt instead of at Dawson's Field. The flight director is credited with saving all the passengers and crew because he gave the evacuation instructions before landing and facilitated a smooth evacuation. The hijackers only gave the passengers several minutes to get out of the plane, and the plane was blown up just seconds after the last passenger was off, and it was also the first recorded hull loss of a 747. So then the next thing that happened was a Vickers VC-10 was hijacked and used as leverage to try and free Khaled from the British prison. The hijacker was a sympathizer of the PFLP, not an actual PFLP member, and they took it to Dawson's Field. It's now being called the Revolution Airport. The hijackers and the other PFLP members that were at Dawson's Field ended up separating all the hostages into people that were Jewish or had been to Israel and they thought that they were Jewish, or non-Jewish people. The non-Jewish people were taken to a hotel in a city nearby, but they were freed by the American military and the USSR and British military a few days later. But the Jewish people were kept at the airfield, and they were threatened, held at gunpoint, and not given food or water, and just not treated very well. The planes were eventually blown up to make a statement, obviously, like trying to get people to bring attention to what was going on with Palestine and Israel, and the remaining hostages were released in exchange for Khaled. So the whole thing of what came out of this was the Federal Air Marshal Service, or the Federal Air Marshal Program. It was a program initially in the 60s, but it was expanded after this incident. Originally, it was only deployed on high-risk flights and select international flights, but then in response to this, Nixon expanded the program and put the Federal Air Marshal Service as part of the FAA. It was regarded as one of the most rigorous training and and officers were the most capable officers since they had to have firearms, but if they shot a hole in the side of the plane, that just wouldn't go over very well. But in 2005, a man got into an argument with his wife and ran up towards the front of the plane, but when they asked him to return to his seat, he implied he had a bomb in his backpack, and the air marshals gave up their cover and forced him out on the jetway, where they eventually shot him. That brought a lot of press and, bad press to the Air Marshal Service. There's also a lot of controversy. By nature, they're very secretive, and to cut costs, they stopped putting air marshals on long-haul flights to avoid overnight hotel stays, but it was argued that those are the most important flights to have air marshals on, so they put them back on there. The FAA is also accused of inflating their numbers so that the numbers read more than 5%, but the actual, a whistleblower reported that it was actually about 3 to 4%. Many have reported using drugs or alcohol to stay awake on the flights, and the New York Times quotes, "Several air marshals have said that they took medication or drank alcohol to stay awake, despite a policy prohibiting alcohol consumption within 10 hours before work." And a lot of 13 air marshals received DUIs between 2016 and 2018. One marshal, who is a recovering alcoholic, saw himself featured in a TSA alcohol awareness promo video and subsequently committed suicide. Several currently have pending charges for pedophilia. On August 26th, 2 air marshals in Houston, Texas were convicted of possession with intent to sell for cocaine and also other bribery charges. And their effectiveness is mostly just the thought that the air marshals are on there. It costs about $200 million per arrest. They only have about 4.2 arrests a year. And on August 21st, 2018, 2 air marshals were detained in Minneapolis because they showed their gun to the flight crew instead of their badge. So the flight crew made an emergency landing, and the 2 air marshals were arrested and hopefully fired. So they might just be a bit of a outdated program. They might have been a good idea back in the 70s and 80s when hijacking was a huge thing, but that's not so much of a big thing anymore. Most of that security stuff, as we're learning, takes part on the ground, and it's not a super relevant program.